Except for the barking of a distant dog, the faint wailing of a waltz, the rustle of a roosting bird, and the sound of Plummer saying that if her refusal was due to anything she may have heard about that breach of promise case of his a couple of years ago, he would like to state that he was more sinned against than sinning, and that the girl had absolutely misunderstood him, all was still. "Psst!" "Aye, mister." It was a voice. It came from above. Was it an angel's voice? Not altogether. It was Albert's. The boy was leaning out of a window some 6 feet higher up the castle wall. George, his eyes by now grown used to the darkness, perceived that the stripling gesticulated as one having some message to impart. Then, glancing to one side, he saw what looked like some kind of a rope swayed against the wall. He reached for it. The thing was not a rope. It was a knotted sheet. From above came Albert's hoarse whisper. "Look alive!" This was precisely what George wanted to do for at least another 50 years or so, and it seemed to him, as he stood there in the starlight, gingerly fingering this flimsy linen thing, that if he were to suspend his 180 pounds of bone and sinew at the end of it over the black gulf outside the balcony, he would look alive for about 5 seconds, and after that goodness only knew how he would look. He knew all about knotted sheets. He had read 100 stories in which heroes, heroines, low comedy friends, and even villains did all sorts of reckless things with their assistants. There was not much comfort to be derived from that. It was one thing to read about people doing silly things like that, quite another to do them yourself. He gave Albert's sheet a tentative shake. In all his experience, he thought he had never come across anything so supremely unstable. One calls it Albert's sheet for the sake of convenience. It was really Reggie Byng's sheet, and when Reggie got up to his room in the small hours of the morning and found the thing a mass of knots, he jumped to the conclusion, being a simple-hearted young man, that his bosom friend, Jack Ferris, who had come up from London to see Lord Belpher through the trying experience of a coming-of-age party, had done it as a practical joke, and went and poured a jug of water over Jack's bed. This is life. Just one long succession of misunderstandings and rash acts and what not. Absolutely. Albert was becoming impatient. He was in the position of a great general who thinks out some wonderful piece of strategy and can't get his army to carry it out. Many boys, seeing Plummer enter the room below and listening at the keyhole, and realizing that George must have hidden somewhere and deducing that he must be out on the balcony, would have been baffled as to how to proceed. Not so Albert. To dash up to Reggie Byng's room and strip his sheet off the bed and tie it to the bedpost and fashion a series of knots in it and lower it out of the window took Albert about 3 minutes. His part in the business had been performed without a hitch, and now George, who had nothing in the world to do but the childish task of climbing up the sheet, was jeopardizing the success of the whole scheme by delay. Albert gave the sheet an irritable jerk. It was the worst thing he could have done. George had almost made up his mind to take a chance when the sheet was snatched from his grasp as if it had been some live thing deliberately eluding his clutch. The thought of what would have happened had this occurred when he was in mid-air caused him to break out in a cold perspiration. He retired a pace and perched himself on the rail of the balcony. "Psst!" said Albert. "It's no good saying psst," rejoined George in an annoyed undertone. "I could say psst. Any fool could say psst." Albert, he considered, in leaning out of the window and saying psst, was merely touching the fringe of the subject. It is probable that he would have remained seated on the balcony rail, regarding the sheet with cold aversion, indefinitely, had not his hand been forced by the man, Plummer. Plummer, during these last minutes, had shot his bolt. He had said everything that a man could say, much of it twice over, and now he was through. All was ended. The verdict was in. No wedding bells for Plummer. "I think," said Plummer gloomily, and the words smote on George's ears like a knell, "I think I'd like a little air." George leaped from his rail like a hunted grasshopper. If Plummer was looking for air, it meant that he was going to come out on the balcony. There was only one thing to be done. It probably meant the abrupt conclusion of a promising career, but he could hesitate no longer. George grasped the sheet. It felt like a rope of cobwebs, and swung himself out. Maud looked out on the balcony. Her heart, which had stood still when the rejected one opened the window and stepped forth to commune with the shooting stars, beat again. There was no one there. Only emptiness and Plummer. "This," said Plummer sombrely, gazing over the rail into the darkness, "is the place where that fellow what's his name jumped off in the rain of the thingummy, isn't it?" Maud understood now, and a thrill of the purest admiration for George's heroism swept over her. So, rather than compromise her, he had done Leonard's leap. How splendid of him! If George, now sitting on Reggie Byng's bed, taking a rueful census of the bits of skin remaining on his hands and knees after his climb, could have read her thoughts, he would have felt well rewarded for his abrasions. "I've a jolly good mind," said Plummer, "to do it myself." He uttered a short, mirthless laugh. "Well, anyway," he said recklessly, "I'll jolly well go downstairs and have a brandy and soda." Albert finished untying the sheet from the bedpost and stuffed it under the pillow. "And now," said Albert, "for a quiet smoke in the scullery." These massive minds require their moments of relaxation. Chapter 13